I wanted to fill you in on my worst offshore experience ever, and I have filtered quite a few experiences and came to the conclusion that this specific experience was by far the worst experience that I've ever had. And I thought it was important for me to share it so you can hopefully avoid making the same mistake that I made. There's a little bit of preview to this, okay? So I had a company in Hong Kong, and as you probably know, Hong Kong used to be a tax haven. I believe it is still at this point in time. And there was a specific deal. The deal was that if you had a company that generated income from overseas, offshore, then that income was not taxable in Hong Kong. That was very appealing to me at the time because I had an internet company. We were selling advertising services. I ran a marketing agency. Well, in fact, I still run a marketing agency today, but the services we had back then are very different to the services we offer today. Anyway, we decided it was time to go offshore so we can, minimize the amount of taxes that we pay on our income. And I decided that Hong Kong was the best option because I was in Asia at that time and they had a really good setup. I could get a bank account, I could get PayPal integrated, and that was really important for me at the time. What happened was that China took over Hong Kong. They installed a puppet politician, and the political system has been changing ever since. And they promoted one country, two systems. Things haven't really reverted back to normal ever since. Anyway, I had a couple of problems with this company. During one specific year, I had to provide a lot of proof of transactions that I had, generated for a company. And that was really awkward because what kind of a government asks you for proof of invoices sent? They didn't just ask me for the invoices that I had, to prove that, I had an invoice for the money that I received. No, they asked for email correspondence. So I had to provide a lot of proof for certain transactions. And that was very weird to me at that time because it's not something that happened before, not something I anticipated could happen. And the reason why it happened, and that was the last year that I had the company open for, the reason why it happened was because Hong Kong, they decided to move the accounting for offshore companies from Hong Kong to mainland China. And the whole system changed. They were very suspicious, very skeptical. They asked for a lot of proof. And it was just such a pain in the neck to get it done. It was just back and forth. And I'm like, for what? Because I had no tax due in Hong Kong because my clients all came from outside Hong Kong. The only time I would have been required by law to pay my taxes was if and when I had business generated from Hong Kong, which I didn't. And it was just, US companies, Canadian companies, so not really an issue, but they were so skeptical. They were just looking for just a little error so they could tax me on the money that I generated. And that was the end of my Hong Kong experience. And that led to me opening up a business and bank account in Belize. And there's a specific process here as well. So I ended up with Choice Bank Belize. If you know the history, you probably know that that bank went bankrupt. And it pulled down a lot of people, especially people that had prepaid cards when the money on those cards became worthless. That happened already after I had closed my company in Belize and bank account in Belize. And so what I did, I moved from Hong Kong to Belize, and it was my mistake. I didn't do a lot of research, I didn't look into the bank, but I basically only had two options for the bank. For banks that would help me open up an account. I don't know what the main bank in Belize is right now, but that bank rejected me because they told me the only way that we're going to open up a company for you is if you physically live in Belize. And I know that was not going to happen. So I ended up going with an alternative, which was Choice Bank Belize. And Choice Bank Belize was a bank that made it pretty easy. I paid the agency, I think, $1,000 to help me open the account. And what I did was I opened up an account in US dollars and one in euros. I deposited the money. The minimum deposit was $1,000 for the US dollar account and 1,000 euros for the euro account. And that really worked pretty well. And in the beginning, everyone was friendly, everything was nice, no problems at all. So I actually thought I made a good choice. And then what happened was, opened up the company, opened up the bank account, and I started transferring money into the account for my clients. First I think I transferred from Hong Kong to Belize. And again, it was the same deal for the Belizian company, 0% tax on income generated outside of Belize. So I could, get money in from Hong Kong, from Singapore, UK, had clients there, from the US and Canada. So I had just money transferred into the Belizian company, no problem. And that's how I then continued the business, because I had so many problems in Hong Kong. And I used the same agency as well. So they helped me. I was very grateful. They were very professional. Never had any issues with them at all. There was then a point when it was time for me to transfer money out from the Belizian bank account, and that's something you always have to check. And that's when I stumbled upon a really disgusting reality, which was that I had to send in a wire request before the wire was sent. I never had something like that, because usually it's just you log online, you have the token device. Through the token device, you generate the PIN, and that's how you submit the transaction, the bank wire, the ACH, depending on the bank you use, depending on where you transfer the money to. But with Choice Bank Belize, it was just so off. You had to send in the request. And I remember transferring out first, I tried $1,000, and that was approved within like 2 days. After that, I tried it again. And then the second bank wire, which was for a larger sum, was not approved. And then I contacted them, why aren't you approving this transaction? Why hasn't the wire been sent yet? Because I need to pay my bills. I had a supplier that I needed to pay, and they were really, slowing things down with their manual approval process. And then they said, well, we cannot accept this wire request at this time because we need to do our due diligence. And then I felt like, what if I really transfer a lot of money in there? And then they would say, no, you can't transfer the money out. Then I'd be screwed. So I ended up closing the bank account. And before I closed the bank account, I sent in an email to the bank, and I said, I've never worked with a bank that required that. It should be instantaneous, but it wasn't. And then the bank assistant that I work with, she got really mad. And she started cursing at me, and it was just terrible. At that time, I already knew that the decision that I made, which was to leave the bank, was the right decision. The bank went bankrupt. I don't know exactly the whole story behind it, but I just know that a lot of people lost a lot of money. Anyway, this was a story that I thought was worth mentioning. The lessons that I learned from this story were simply that do your due diligence, only work with reputable banks, don't work with new banks. Make sure you really know who you're working with. Make sure the country is well respected, because you don't want to set up a company, or you don't want to have a bank account in a country that has kind of sketchy reputation, because if you ask a client to transfer money to Belize, they're going to look at you like this, like, why Belize? Why do you have a company in Belize? Why don't you have a company in London? Why don't you have a company in Singapore, Hong Kong? Why don't you have a company in the US, Canada? They're going to look at you odd, because Belize is a tax haven, and it has a lot of dark sides, I think. And that is something that I learned, and I have had companies and bank accounts in so many different places. What's your worst offshore experience, and what do you think about my personal offshore experience in Belize? Leave a comment below and let us know. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm uploading new videos on digital nomad locations, travel updates, visas, crypto advice, and business advice several times a week right now. I highly recommend that you grab a free copy of my ebook Nomad Elite, the Insider's Guide to Retaining a Life of Freedom. All you need to do is click on the link below the video. And if you got some more time left, check out these videos. Thank you for watching.